And this is a big breakthrough, breaking news here that we're getting to you. The government panel has recommended granting a permission for restricted emergency use authorization. This is for the Bharat Biotech's indigenously developed COVID-19 vaccine called as Covaxin. This is now the second vaccine that has gotten the nod from the panel. Now all eyes, of course, on the DCGI, on the drugs controller, to get the final approval, the final nod for not just the Bharat Biotech vaccine, but also for the Oxford vaccine. Yesterday, we saw the Oxford vaccine getting the nod from the expert panel. Today, Covaxin, that is Bharat Biotech's vaccine, also has been given the nod by the expert panel, recommending it to the drugs controller, saying that both these vaccines can now be given permission for emergency use. So let me, in fact, go across to Ayushman, who's joining us. Ayushman, this is such good news really coming in. Yesterday, of course, it was Oxford vaccine. Today, the Bharat Biotech. And this also is all that more important because it's the first indigenously developed vaccine now to get approval from the expert panel.
Well, Avni, currently we are being told by the officials, sources that the approval for Covaxin, which is the indigenously developed vaccine, has also been given. Yesterday, it was the Covishield, and today it's the Covaxin, which has received the recommendation from the SCC. And in all likelihood, both these candidates are going to receive the nod from the DCGI, and India, in its hand, will have two vaccines to roll out when the final approval comes from the Controller General.
Yes, absolutely, Ayushman. And like you pointed out even earlier in the day, we are yet to hear any sort of, formal comment coming in from the drugs controller at this point in time. So now both these vaccines have been given the green signal by the expert panel. So now, of course, the ball is in the court of the drugs controller to get that final nod before it can actually start being used. If you can take us through the process from here on.
Yes, sir. From here on, the DCGI will be writing, like we had earlier reported, that DCGI will give the formal action to the vaccines approval, and from there, the government of India will be then engaging with the both the companies, be it the Bharat Biotech or the Serum Institute. A formal contract will be signed as to decide as to how many vials are to be supplied for the modalities, and from there on, in a fortnight, we can expect the possible rollout of vaccine amongst the priority group. We have seen the dry run being conducted all across the country today in the state capital. So the government's focus is when the vaccine is being rolled out in India, there are two candidates currently who are in the fray, and both the indigenously developed Covaxin as well as MHRA approved, and also the recommended from the SCC Covishield, both are set to be approved by the DCGI. And from here on, we can expect any time the DCGI's approval, and then the government will go into the contract with both these companies for the formal rollout of the vaccine in the country.
All right, Ayushman, thank you so much for joining us with all of those details. Let's in fact get in some more voices here. Dr. Rakesh Mishra, Director, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad, is joining me on the phone line. Dr. Mishra, thank you so much for speaking to Mirror Now. This is such good news coming in here. After we saw Oxford vaccine getting the nod today, the expert panel has recommended even Bharat Biotech's vaccine to be granted emergency use authorization.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Back-to-back news. We are more equipped now to fight in this pandemic. And more important thing is the availability of these vaccines, because these are both produced in large quantity in country. So our real strength in vaccine is in these two candidates. Now they are not anymore candidates. They are already kind of approved. Not so much for the mRNA-based vaccine because they are not produced here. So this is very relevant for us, both in terms of availability, affordability, and even equally important, the logistic of these vaccines is more feasible because you can transport them in ice or normal freezing conditions and not minus 40 or minus 70, which is very, very demanding kind of logistic. So it's great news, and I think government is already making all the groundwork, the preparations, and hopefully by Pongal, the vaccine rollout and vaccination process will begin.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Mishra. And now that we have, two vaccines which have already been given the nod, and hopefully we will hear from the drugs controller soon as well for that final approval. What can you tell us about how it could work out in terms of deciding which vaccine to use where? What is the process that's going to be followed for the actual inoculation drives?
I think from that point of view, that who to give which vaccine, both vaccines are of a similar kind, in which you are injecting inactivated coronavirus, and in other one you have a modified version of another virus which is producing the protein of this coronavirus. So they are of similar nature, and I don't think the vaccine has any particular preference in terms of age or gender or any other thing, unless long-term usage comes up with like phase 4 data can come, and then one can make these kind of preferences. At the moment, I think it's the simple logistics and availability of the vaccine, so one can design. And in my opinion, although I have not seen the phase 3 data for the Bharat Biotech, but I expect it to be as good, if not better, than the AstraZeneca vaccine. So I think their transport conditions and all other aspects are similar. Both are 2-dose vaccines. So I think they are equivalent in most practical purposes, and there should not be any specific criteria. It will simply be just availability and logistics that will decide who will get which vaccine.
Right. And Dr. Mishra, the other point, of course, if you can also help us understand, in your opinion, what kind of a timeline now would we be looking at? Of course, the DCGI, the drugs controller will, usually will give the nod. Now the final nod has to come in from there. Once that nod comes in, what kind of a timeline do you see before the actual inoculation starts?
See, now since the committee has given its recommendation, which means the scientific evaluation and data analysis and all these aspects are satisfactory, and the remaining thing becomes really kind of formality, which is important, and regulators have to complete those things, and maybe it's a matter of a day or two, in my opinion, that all the things will be cleared for these vaccines to go ahead and start the real preparation for the rollout. And so that's going to be, I don't think there is any more delay, because crucial decisions have been already taken, which is based on the data, which is the key thing. Which ensure that they are safe and there is sufficient evidence that there is immunogenicity, and therefore there is a rationale in using these vaccines. So these things are taken care. But I think people don't have to start relaxing when now vaccine has come, so we should throw away our mask. I think that we have to keep, even if you are given vaccine, you have to wait for another month and a half before the full effect of the vaccine to come in. So we must be aware that the social vaccine of mask and social distancing and hand hygiene still will be needed for several months. And these vaccines that are now being approved, they will be helping us in defeating this vaccine. But other measures are extremely important, and we must continue practicing that.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Mishra. That is extremely important, and extremely important to keep reiterating that, this is not the time to let our guards down, even though the vaccine approvals have started coming in. Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra, for your perspective on this. Let me, in fact, go back to my colleague Ayushman, who's with us still. Ayushman, if you can just tell us a little bit about the Bharat Biotech vaccine here, because both Oxford vaccine, Bharat Biotech vaccine, important to, mention here that they can be stored at a much lower temperature compared to many of the other vaccines which require extremely cold storage.
Well, Avni, when the government decided, when the subject expert group decided to reconvene the meeting today at about 2 o'clock, we wanted to know as to what is the possible reason why there is an extra push being made in this direction. And the government sources indicated to us that there are 3 basic reasons why the government wanted the Bharat Biotech, and the impetus was there on Bharat Biotech. The first was that the vaccine was safe. This was determined from the first and second phase results, though it is not peer-reviewed. The vaccine study has said that it is safe. Second, 13,000 is the number which the company quotes that number of people have been vaccinated. This is one of the largest numbers if you compare it to the other vaccine candidates. And third, and the most important thing is the process through which this vaccine is being made. It is having an inactivated form of the virus, whole virion, which is the traditional form of making vaccines, which we have seen in case of the other vaccines as well, be it polio or the other ones. So the reliability on this grows. There is doubts on the efficacy. There is, of course, doubt on the other immunogenicity data, but that the panel seems to have been convinced that that can also be assessed later. Now, how the experts view it, that remains to be seen. But for now, definitely, the Covaxin has been given the approval, given the fact that its safety data is on the forefront, and also it's the whole virion-based vaccine, which we have seen in past succeeding. This is the mRNA technology is something that might sound new to people, but at the same time, the whole virion-based vaccine is one of the trusted mechanism of vaccine that gets the advantage, and that is what led the pitch. And we have seen for about 4 deliberations took place, and finally, the sources indicate us that Serum Institute's Covishield and also Bharat Biotech's indigenous COVID vaccine, that is Covaxin, both have received the approval. So now India has in its hand 2 independent COVID vaccines which can be rolled out to the priority group.
All right, Ayushman, thank you so much for joining us with all of those details. So extremely important update here coming in with respect to the vaccine. Now, of course, all eyes are on the drugs controller at this point in time, because remember, the expert panel has given its nod for that the vaccines should get the emergency use authorization. But now it is up to the drugs controller to give that final nod before it can actually start going ahead and getting used, and the inoculation drives with these vaccines can actually start.